Hello and thank you for joining us for another tutorial. In this session, we will learn all we can about strings. The subject is broad, so what we'll do is go over the most used features. This video is a continuation of the beginner to an intermediate playlist. Strings are a collection of sequential read-only characters, and any text data can be stored in a string variable. Strings are a reference type that the stack will have a reference to where the actual data is stored in the heap. We are not going over classes, but the string is a class. That being said, we will have some review of classes. In the last video, we went over the internals of value types. Let's review passing values between variables and methods in regards to strings. Let's do a quick review and get a better understanding. We mentioned that value types are stored in the stack, but this isn't always true. In some cases, value types can be stored in heap or registers. Don't worry about registers for now. The visual we showed was to give you an understanding of how value types work when passing. At this moment, it's not essential on where the variables are stored, but how it functions. Let's do another quick visual review of passing value types again. All parameters are passed by value unless specified with the keywords ref, out, and in. This is important, so please remember that this means that the value of that variable is copied. If we go back to our application where we passed two int variables to the method, then we updated them, the values are copied as they are passed by value. Let's just work with the ref keyword in this example. If we pass the int using the ref keyword, what really happens is that we are actually referencing the original variable from the main method. Any action taking on the parameter will update the original value. Now, let's review how the same process happens with strings. First, let's create two variables in the main method of type string. In the first string, we will initialize it with hello world. The second will be empty. Now let's assign the first variable to our empty string. At this moment, both strings are pointing to the same value as both variables hold a reference to the string value. Next, let's update the second string and notice that the first string is not updated. The reason for this is that strings are read-only array of characters, and you will also hear that strings are immutable. Regardless of the term used, when you assign a new value to the string, it will delete the reference and assign a new reference of the new string in the heap. This is why the first value was not affected. Let's see if we will make better sense if we visualize it. As we executed our method, we get the main stack frame. Then we allocate two variables in the stack for our strings. We will also allocate for the parameter being passed to our main method, args parameter. Next, when we initialize our strings, we create two values in the heap and then have a pointer in our stack to which our string variables will point. When we assign the first string to our second string, we updated the variable stack reference. Now both variables point to the same value. Then we updated our second variable with a new string. We create a new value in the heap and then update the pointer in the second variable, and hence we left the first variable value in the heap untouched. What happens to the string that is now not being referenced? Remember, we noted that core CLR has some features, and one of them was to manage memory. At some point, it will remove the unused reference object from the heap. This is called garbage collection. We know we said this before, but let's iterate it. Whenever you want to modify a string's value, you will allocate a new value in the heap. So what happens when we pass strings by value to our methods? Same process as before, we allocate a new string. So let's just create a simple method that accepts a string parameter and updates its value in the method and visualize the process. If we execute the program, notice that we did update the value of the string in the method, but once outside the method, our string holds the same value it did when it was initialized. So what happens if we pass the string by reference? We will only use the ref keyword for this example. When we pass the string, we do not pass it as a copy of the reference. We pass the variable in our main method's reference. So now, if we update the string, it will effectively deallocate the original string variable. We hope that this clears things up further, but now let's go over working with strings. The first thing we want to do is iterate through all the characters of the string. We will use the famous hello world text. Using a for loop, we can see that our text data is a collection, and using an index value, we get the character in the index position. We can also reverse the loop. The most common functions of working in strings are searching and extracting values. Let's search for the word world in a string containing the value of hello world. Then extract just the word world. The string class has some methods that can help us. You can always go to the Microsoft documentation site to learn more features that the string class provides. We will provide a link for you in the comment section. So first, let's check to see if the string contains our word. In order to perform this search, we can use the contains method. Please know that using the contains method is case sensitive. To perform the search, we can pass an additional parameter to state, do the search by ignoring the case. We could also use another method to first lower case the string, then do the search. We will keep the contains method without the case sensitivity, and now that we know we have the word we're looking for, let's extract it. To extract the word, we can use the method substring. If we pass it only one integer parameter, then we will start from that integer position of the string and select all the characters until the end. If we pass it two integer parameters, then we start the same thing as before, but end with the second integer value of the string. So what we need is to find where the world word starts in our string. That will be our first integer value. And we want to find where the world word ends. To find the ending of the word is easy. We just count how many characters we have, and to do this, we need to use the length property. Property is a new word we are learning. We will give you a brief description, but we'll go over them fully in the upcoming tutorials. So properties allow a class to represent values, in our case, of the length of the string, how many characters our string is made of. We also set values of a class property, but string length property only allowing us to get the value, so it's read only. Back to how we find the beginning of our word, we can use another method called index of. Here is how we can use that method. In the variable that holds our hello world, call the method index of. Then the word we are searching for. If it returns -1, then we couldn't find the word first index position, else it will give us the first index location. Now that we have both beginning and the end of the word, let's use substring method to extract the word. We can also use two other methods, like removing the word or replacing it with something else. So to replace the word, you can use the replace method, and to remove the word, you can use the remove method. Note that when using these methods, they generate a new string, but not modify the original string. So now let's go to the Microsoft's documentation website and review some other methods that you can find and use for string manipulation. Here, search for system.string class. Now you can see all the methods that are available to you on a string class. Most, if not all of them, will have examples of how to use them. Now for a real-world example of working with strings. Depending on your career path, at some point you will need to create an ETL program. ETL stands for extract, transform, and load. Extract data from some source, whether a CSV, XML database, or some other source. And now that you have extracted the data, you will need to transform it into something else. And then you would load it into another format. So here is the requirement for our ETL program. The company you work for is like IMDb and displays movie data. They receive files from movie studios. Your job is to use the files to find out which actors played a certain role, then extract that data and load it into the company's database. If you have not gone over databases, so instead we will load the data back into the file. We have already got some data for you to work with for this project, and the data is in a CSV format. It has 3 columns. In the first column, a unique identifier for the movie. The second column is the movie name. And the last column has our list of actors in JSON format. Since we have not learned to work with JSON objects, let's just use what we do know about strings to extract the data. So as before, let's write out the requirements. We need to read our CSV file and load it into memory in an array of structs. This is our extract. Our struct needs to have the following values: a numeric value identifying the unique ID, a string for the movie name, an array of string for the actors, and then next, iterate through the struct and extracts for the actors from the JSON object using the previous string commands that we went over. This is transform. Then we use the new array of struct and write it out to a file. And finally, this is our load. You should always try to understand the problem before writing a single line of code, because write code is a sexy part, but it can get ugly when you have to solve the problems while you're writing code, because now you are doing 2 things at the same time. So let's use the advice we just gave and go over how to extract the JSON object. JSON is a format representing a piece of data. We are just going over JSON so that we can understand how to extract the data using strings. Later on, when we learn more about C# language, we will use the BCL, base class libraries, we discussed that have built-in JSON support. So let's do a brief introduction to the structure of the JSON for the cast column. We are going to use an online JSON viewer. You can just Google online JSON viewer. You may get different results, but we will use the jsonviewer.stack.hu site. Next, let's grab the string from our CSV file, just one row of one column. Paste it into the JSON viewer, and notice that we are getting an error, and this is due to a formatting issue, so let's fix that quickly. Now, if we navigate to the viewer, we can see that our JSON is an array of objects. Look further into the object and we can tell that there is a property called name that has the actor name that we want. Now let's look at the string representation of it. The bracket starts the array, then each array is separated by a curly brace and a comma. So what we need is to split the string with a brace and a comma, and then we have an array of string that has the name that we want. Next, we would loop through our array of strings, then use the index of to find the name, and it ends with a comma. So now we have a beginning and an end for our substring. Now that we have an idea of how to work with the data, let's create the program structure. One, we need a method that reads our CSV file and returns an array of strings. Then we need a new method to iterate through our string array and another method to map the string into our struct. We then would pass back an array of struct to work with. And number three, finally, we iterate through our new struct and load it into the file. And our final method is to create two files, one that holds the movie names and another that holds our actors. And the struct for the first file will be ID movie_name, and the second file will be ID actor. So now we have a plan, let's put it into practice. We are going to hard code the file name for this exercise. Next, we create a method that will load the CSV file into an array of strings. From the file class, we are going to use the readAllLines method, and you should be familiar with this method from our previous tutorials. Then, we need to transform the array of lines into our movie and actor struct. Let's create the transform method and pass back our struct. Now we are ready to create our struct. Next, let's work with the transform method. To extract the data and map it, we need to iterate through each line one record at a time. Now we need the lines transformed into our array of structs, but we need to skip the first line as this is our CSV header values. Next, we create the method that will map the line to our struct. In this method, we need to do the string manipulation for extracting the names of the actors. We are going to need our CSV file. Let's set the property of the file to copy always so that we have it in the same place as our executable. Now that we have the line split, let's map the results to our struct and converting the ID into an int. We also require another method that will split our actors into an array of strings. Now we need to split the JSON string to arrays of strings, then perform the string extraction, which will be another method. Now that we have a basic structure set up, let's create the base method for our load, where we will split the struct into two separate files. We said earlier that to extract the names, we need to split the JSON file into an array of strings. The separator is a closing curly brace and a comma. Now that we have that string, we need to get the first integer value from the string where the actor name starts. Since we don't know the length of the name for the ending, we need to identify the marker after the name. In our case, the pattern is a single quote and a comma. Now that we have the beginning and end of the name, let's see how we can extract it. First, let's just get the whole string where the name starts. The reason is that if we use the index of, we get the wrong place in the string. The way index of works is that it finds the first position of the match. Therefore, we need to get the name so that if we use the index of next, we get the ending of the name. Now that we have the first part of the name, all we have to do is now substrings to get the name. Now let's step through our program to see if the code works as expected. It seems that the splitting of the columns is not working with a comma. We also need a double comma as a splitter. Now we have the column split up, but in two parts. So we need to split the first part to get all three columns. Let's go back and load our struct to two separate files. One file will have our movie names, the other will have our actors. Both files will have our unique identifier for the movie, so we know which actor belongs to which movie. Now let's run our program on the entire file and see what happens. It looks like we didn't account for a bug. This is due to some records having an escape character that causes our column to split into 3 instead of the expected 2. We can account for this by having a logic that will do additional steps for 3 columns versus 2. Now, if we test our application, we see that we have encountered another error. This is due to some records not having the name for the actor. We just need to add a null check logic to skip the record. Now for the final time, if we execute our ETL application, we can see that it executed without errors. Looking at the file, we can see that we didn't account for the new line after writing a record to the file. So let's fix that real quick. Before running our program again, let's clean up the 2 generated files. This time it looks like our application is behaving as expected. However, there are some minor issues that we can go back and fix, but the point of this exercise was to get you familiarized with string manipulation. So also, we will at some point go over the Visual Studio and debugging techniques. So thank you so much for joining us, and in our next tutorial, we'll cover classes, structs, and interfaces. We hope to see you then. We have also launched our free mentoring sessions. The sessions are free, and all you have to do is be there. So for more information, please see the discussion board on how to contact us.